Let's learn how to use an array list in C# using MVC. File, New Project, and we want an ASP.NET Web Application .NET Framework, and we'll call this ArrayList, spelled correctly, sample, and framework is specified OK. We'll click OK. We want an empty MVC application. Click OK. It's going to go create the framework for us. Now that we have the framework, I'm going to go ahead and close this window, and I'm going to come over and create a brand new controller. So right mouse click, add controller. Remember, the controller is the one who does most of the work. It interfaces between your models, where the data is, and the view, what the user sees. Choose empty controller, click add, and we're going to call it home. Leave it home controller, and then we'll create that controller, and then we're going to start typing in some code for how to work with an array list. Now, an array list is a dynamic array. It can grow and shrink, unlike the array. The array is a fixed size. And the way we create an array list is we come in, we say the word array list, and you specify array list, and you give it a name. We'll call ours AL names, and then we have to instantiate it by saying new array list, parenthesis, parenthesis, and then notice we have an error, and that's because C# doesn't know who array list is. So you put your cursor on the error, click on the down arrow, and we say we need to bring in the collections library because that's where array list. Now the error goes away, and I can start working with and creating elements in my array list. Here's how you do it. AL names is the name of my array list, dot add, and bugs, and I'm just going to copy and paste to avoid typos, and we'll have bugs, Daffy, and Mickey. So we now just added 3 items to the array list, and every time we do that, it dynamically grows. Array lists are not strongly typed, meaning I could come in here and say alnames.add and put the number 10 in there, and the system wouldn't care because you can put anything you want. We could put objects, strings, numbers, doubles, anything. That's a little bit dangerous. So be aware that array lists are not strongly typed, but they are very flexible in adding and deleting items. They aren't all that great with arrays or with memory, though, because it's not contiguous. Or actually, what happens is when we exceed the amount of memory we have, it has to go and double the memory, and it does that because it thinks it's going to grow more. So how do we actually access the contents of that array list now? We could actually use what we call a for each or a for loop. And so I'm going to go ahead and put in a for loop there. And I say for this for loop, we want to go ahead and work with the alnames.count, because count tells you how many elements you have in an array list. So we start at 0, and as long as our counter is less than the count, we'll go ahead and increment our counter to keep us in the loop. Now what we could do is, if we wanted to actually work with each element, let's say that we want to write it out to the view. And remember that in the other videos I've shown you, we have what they call the view bag, and the view bag is just a data structure of anything we want. And we could make a brand new section in there, and we can call it anything we want. So let's call this array data. I could have called it stuff, output, contents, anything I want. And we're going to go ahead and assign to that view bag. We're going to concatenate onto it. I'm going to drop to the next line. We're going to go ahead and have a p tag. So we're going to do some dynamic HTML, and then we're going to go and grab the contents of that array list. And so we could say AL names, spelled correctly, bracket iCount, because iCount says what position are you in, and then we can concatenate on closing p tag and we have now built a dynamic list of information that has a p tag, content of the array in position 0, 1, 2, and 3. And we write it to a p tag and send it to the output. Now let's go ahead and create the view, and remember, as long as I'm in that index or that method, I can click Add View, and it makes a view with the same name of that index method. Index, same one, click Add. And in this situation, I left the use the layout page so we don't have as much HTML showing up. And now if I want to print the contents of that view bag, I simply put the razor symbol, HTML.raw, which says take some data. We're going to turn that data into a string. And where's that data at? That data is in our view bag dot array data. And I think that's what we called it. Come back over here just to make sure. Array data in the view bag. So this will now take the contents of array data, which will be a p tag, contents of the first element, closing p tag, contents of the second element, closing p tag, and so forth. And it will do that for all 4 items. Let's go ahead and run that and see how it works and see if it does print off Bugs, Daffy, Mickey, and the number 10 to our web page as p tags. So when we run that, it goes and it tries to find the home controller, and in the home controller it tries to find a method called index, and then it prints off Bugs, Daffy, Mickey, and 10. And that's how you can work with an array list. Now, one other thing we could do with the array list, because it is a little dangerous, is we could actually have an if statement in there, and we could say if, and access the element of that array list and say, are you a string? And if so, let's go ahead and concatenate onto our view bag. Let's just put the word string, and actually we want to go ahead and do the same thing. Let's just copy this line, and we're going to replace the array with the word string. And I could have just made it one big string. I have it separated, it's no big deal. Otherwise I could have said else if, and let's grab all of this code again. If you are an int, then let's display the word int. And then we'll say else, and we'll get rid of this, and we'll just say unknown. So what's going to happen is we grab the first item of the array list, put it into p tags, print it out, or actually concatenate it onto our view bag array.data key, and then we say, what's your data type? Are you a string? Now put the word string in there. Are you an int? Put the word int in there. Otherwise put the word unknown. So let's go back to our view. That still looks correct. Let's run it one more time and see if we have Bugs string, Daffy string, Mickey string, 10 int, because we can maybe check the data type. Bugs string, Daffy string, Mickey string, 10 int. So the bad thing about array lists is that they are not strongly typed, but the good thing is that if you really have to use them, which I wouldn't because you can use a list instead, you can actually overcome the data typing, the strong typing, by checking each value. However, that requires programming code, and it also requires execution time for working with an array list. So instead, you ought to just work with the list.